Hello, and welcome back to the Student's Opinion. Today, we are here for our 13th episode, and we are going to talk about how many languages should you study at school. So, as always, I am Medhaansh, and I'm accompanied with my co-host Vineet. So, Vineet, do you want to start us off by stating what do you think about this topic of discussion?
Yes, Medhansh. This is a interesting topic to say the least, and a bit of a personal background. Back in India, we had three languages that we studied. So we had English, which was our first language every year, and then from grades 1 to 10, we had a second language, and I was studying Kannada. And from grades 5 to 8, we had a third language, and I chose Hindi. So in that sense, in India, we had to study three languages. And based on my experience, I think three languages is too much, and schools should just focus on two languages. Because, like, I believe that as a child, brain is still developing and you can actually pick up on new languages and learn them quickly compared to if you're older. So I found that learning Hindi from fifth grade was actually very difficult because I had grown up and I wasn't able to understand the language and pick it up as quickly as I did with my second language, Kannada, and English, which from first grade and before as well. And then also there's the point that if you do want to teach your students three languages, you might want to start earlier on, but then that would take more time. So if you're teaching three languages from first grade, that means you're limiting the time that you can spend on other subjects like mathematics and science. So I think focusing on two languages will help streamline a child's education and also help them get the best of learning multiple languages and getting bilingual, and also not sacrificing other subjects that are equally important.
And yes, I definitely can relate to that experience. However, I had some kind of an opposite experience. I had taken up my second language is Hindi, and my third language is Kannada. And I did have a very tough time, to say the least, in terms of learning Kannada as a language. I could not, for the life of me, remember the answers that we had to write. And I remember just hoping that whatever I had written in the examinations turned out to be correct. So, and yes, the number of languages that should be taught in a school is, as you can see, a topic of debate and can vary depending on factors such as the country, the region, the curriculum that's offered in the school, and the resources available. And in general, most schools offer at least one foreign language, as English is one of the most commonly taught language worldwide. However, some schools offer multiple language options, and some countries have national policies that encourage the teaching of more than one foreign language. And it is often argued that learning multiple language can have cognitive, cultural, and economic benefits, and therefore offering more language options in schools can thus be beneficial for students who want to learn and potentially use those languages in the future. Like over here, I'm doing the international baccalaureate, and alongside with English, I'm also learning French in the ab initio level, but still learning it. We learn the different tenses such as the passé composé, and various passages. Our orals are on French. So yeah, and but however, the decision of how many languages to teach in school depends on, as I said, various factors, and I think it should be made by education policymakers based on needs and priorities of the community and especially of the students. But I'm interested to hear about what are your arguments regarding this particular point.
Now, I believe that there should be choices in the languages that you can learn. So in India, we had the choice to learn either Kannada, Hindi, German, or French. So there were choices. But I think that you should only be required to learn two languages at school. Because otherwise, if you have more languages, you have to devote more time to learning languages. It's not like learning a programming language where the syntax is limited and there isn't a wide vocabulary. Learning an actual language takes a lot of time and effort. It You need to get the intricacies of the language, know when to use what word because there are so many synonyms and the way you speak as well. So it all adds up in complexity, and you really have to devote time to learning a language well. Now, if you just wanted to learn the basics of a language, that should not be the focus of a school. A school which is offering a language should aim to get you to a certain proficiency level with a language. And I think having two languages aids that the best because you're able to focus on just mastering those two languages. And if you have to learn multiple languages, you're dividing your time up and you might not be able to learn each language as well as you could if you were just focusing your resources on two languages. Think about it in other terms, in general as well. If you're specializing in a few areas, you tend to become an expert in them as compared to generalizing. So, in that sense, I believe that specializing in a few languages is the way to go. And that's why I think schools should just require students only to take two languages and not have to do a third language. Now, if the student wanted to learn a third language by themselves, they're free to do that. But then I think since schools have to cater to a wide variety of students who might not all have the same needs, focusing on two languages would be sufficient.
I hear you, Vineet, and but I think I could argue from the perspective of the education makers, and I can state that learning more languages in school can have numerous benefits, such as improving cognitive abilities, enhancing cultural awareness, and increasing employment opportunities. In fact, research has shown that learning multiple languages can improve brain function, memory, and problem-solving skills. It could also promote empathy and cross cultural understanding, which is essential in the globalized world, in the 21st century globalized world that we live in. Moreover, in many countries, being bilingual and multilingual is seen as an asset in the job market, especially in industries such as tourism, hospitality, and international business. So, uh, personally, I feel that I can definitely see why you would disagree with the fact that perhaps it is not essential. But I think since the education makers and the policy makers have seen the fact that, learning an additional language helps. Like, I know as a fact in the United States, alongside with English, you also learn Spanish. But and it definitely helps in the job market. I think you would agree to that point as well. Coming back to India, well, India's a very diverse country. We have more than English and Hindi as a language. Every state has its own language and its own dialect, and I mean, it just the number crosses more than 100. So I can see that in essentially in promoting a unified India, that is one of the main reasons why the policymakers have made it as such. And even coming to Europe, where I am right now, I can see the fact that if you know certain universities, in fact, have a compulsion that you must know the language of the country so that you can study there. For example, a large number of my friends who are planning on studying in university in Germany have to take up German as a B level in in the IB, so that they can show, okay, so taken German, so that's one of the criterias that you can tick off. Okay, so I know a bit of German and I can perhaps pick up with the course material, although the course material is offered in English. uh, Even I think on the basis of international perspective, many students who decided to go and study in various countries where English is not the main language spoken, so, let's say Spain, as where Spanish is the language which is spoken. Now, it does help the individual to know how to speak Spanish, how to communicate in Spanish, whether and let's go to France. If you know French, it's perfect. I mean, it's le fantastique. But yeah, I could see your point, but I think I'm still not convinced on the fact that perhaps we need to reduce our languages. I think instead we could keep the languages available more and more in abundance, so that students can learn them extensively, so that in the future they have improved job opportunities, especially in the world that we live in. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I also get where you're coming from, and that knowing more languages increases your employability, especially in a globalized world where you have to mingle with people from other countries and probably speaking in their language would be beneficial. But then we also have to look at it this way. Not every school has the resources to teach multiple languages. Now, these resources include textbooks, teachers, and then other practice material, not every school can afford it. And there are a lot of schools where you cannot get more than probably one or two teachers per language. And then if you have students needed to learn multiple languages, it puts more stress on those teachers, and it also makes it difficult for the school because they now have to go and find teachers who can teach new other languages. Now, say you mandate three languages, but then your school can only find an English and a French teacher. So you're going to have to look really hard for a German teacher. And then even if you do find one, they might not be very good. And that's subjective, but still, it you're sacrificing the quality of learning languages for quantity. So that's why I think that if you limit it to two languages, you're getting the quality of learning a language. And when you get that quality, it's, I believe, more important than quantity in any aspect, not just languages. And then we also have to look at preparation for higher education. That, yes, as you did state, some students who want to study in other countries need to learn the language of instruction in that country, like German. Now, that could be your second language, and your first language could be English, and you could be done. But then if you have to learn another language on top of that, you're spreading your time across learning more subjects, and that makes you less proficient at each individual subject. So you're spreading your resources across more things, and that is limiting your ability to master any of those things. So once again, it all just comes down. We have 24 hours a day, and we can only spend our time doing some things. And the more things we try to do, we are sacrificing on our quality on each of them. And I think three languages for that reason just makes it really difficult for students to cope with. And two languages would be perfect because you get to become bilingual and you get the advantages of understanding different cultures, improving your cognitive abilities by learning multiple languages because they force your brain to work in new ways. So I think three languages is a bit too much, but then I'm still curious to hear how you respond to that.
I think I get it. I get what you mean, especially where in a huge in the population current population of the world that we are in, it is definitely seen that the quality of is reduced and quantity is given more importance to. I feel that I think personally I feel that if you are bilingual, as in you only know two languages in the 21st century at presently. Uh, However, no, to all our listeners, this is my own personal feeling. I think you're in a set of disadvantage because you don't essentially help yourself become a global citizen. Now, to those who don't know what a global citizen is, global citizenship refers to the idea of understanding and participating in global issues and having a sense of responsibility towards the well being of the planet and all its inhabitants. Now, I feel that if an individual, say, learns more languages, it can help become a global citizen in several ways. Now, let's look at understanding diverse perspectives. Learning additional languages can help individuals understand different perspectives and culture, and that can also help them appreciate diversity and become more open-minded and tolerant towards people from different backgrounds. Cross-cultural communication is also present, as speaking more than one or two languages can help individuals communicate effectively with people from different cultures, and that is essential in today's globalized world more than ever, where people from different cultures interact, like always. There is an interaction between different cultures on all perspectives on all aspects. You also develop empathy, and I think empathy is one of the features that we need to make sure is instilled in our generation, because it can help individuals develop empathy towards people from different cultures. And it is because learning languages often involves learning about the culture, the histories, and the value of the people who speak the language. So I'm looking at this from a more constructivist perspective rather than a realist perspective, because as we know how the realist perspective states that, okay, you only think about yourself, but I am looking at it more from a more social cultural perspective, as in the sense that if we don't have empathy for one another, how do we manage to solve issues? Which is one of my other points, such as participation in global issues. We are in we do have a climate crisis on our hands. We have human rights violations. We have a huge increase in the rise of poverty that affect people worldwide. And I feel that if you know those additional languages, instead of rely on Google Translate. Okay, can you change what I'm speaking in English to this? Okay, Bing, this is the language. It can help individuals participate in actual discussions and debates on these issues, and can also understand the perspectives of people from different cultures. And overall, learning more languages can help individuals become more aware of global issues and their impact on people worldwide. How many of our listeners out here know that there is a crisis going on in Peru right now? I would assume only a few who are actually interested in global politics, who have significantly got into it. But you wouldn't know it if you don't speak, let's say, if you don't speak Spanish, and if you don't read news articles on the basis of that. So it also helps you to develop the skills and knowledge that are needed to become responsible global citizens. And I agree with the fact that perhaps quality over quantity is somehow reduced, since giving the fact that we have 24 hours a day. But it again depends on personal perspective. If you do, and the amount of effort you are also put into, if you are really interested, and if you really put in the effort, I think the line between quality and quantity is reduced to a very thin line, or at least that's my perspective. What do you think now?
Yes, you did bring up the fact that we have to become global citizens now, but I believe that even if we have to become global citizens, there are other ways to do it rather than just learning more languages. It might be one component, but it's not the only component. And I just I just feel like forcing a student to learn more than two languages is like forcing a student to take up science in higher education when they don't want to do it. It's like each student has a choice to study the subjects that he or she is interested and passionate about, and forcing them to take another subject when they really don't see the need is sort of like violating that, I believe. Now, I personally would rather spend my time studying maths, physics, and engineering than another language. And that's me personally. Now, probably you would like to study another language compared to, say, more math classes. So, in that sense, we are different. And if we are forcing anything on a set of students, I just don't feel that it's the right thing to do in our education systems. So, yes, and also I've been saying this from the start. If a student wants to learn more than one language, more power to them. They have multiple resources outside of schools. So it's just that in schools, I don't see the need for more than two languages, especially since most of us will not need more than two languages. Pretty much. So if now say I'm here in the United States and a lot of people here learn Spanish. Now, say I wanted to converse with other people in Spanish and I was actually interested in that, I could say use Duolingo or lessons online and actually learn Spanish. And that would be great for me. But what if I did not want to do that? What if I was just happy with the languages I know and I did not want to learn more languages? Then even then I have freedom. I don't have to learn another language because the school doesn't force me to learn multiple languages. So in that sense, I just feel that having multiple languages, once again, is focusing more on the quantity rather than the quality. And it's also like forcing students to do things that they are not really passionate about. And in a sense, you could say is not the best use of their time.
Yes, I definitely can see your point. Uh, and I agree. Perhaps forcing as a word would be especially wrong, because it also creates a negative attitude towards language learning, I believe. And when you force a student to learn a language, it may, as you say, it may be perceived as a chore rather than a valuable skill, which can reduce their said motivation and interest in learning the language. But I think instead of forcing students to learn more languages, schools could create and should create an environment that promotes language learning. This can also include providing resources and support for language learning, encouraging students to take an interest in language learning, and creating opportunities for students to use language in real life situations. By creating a positive learning environment, schools can encourage students to take an interest in language learning and motivate them to become proficient in languages. And I quite agree with the fact that perhaps you may not, it's not essential for you to learn Spanish, but you cannot disagree on the fact that since you are in the United States, and you does a huge significant percentage of Americans speak Spanish, as well, perhaps even a large number of people speak it as first language. So it not only helps you in the job market, it also helps you in having basic conversation skills. Say let's say you shift to a state in the United States which has a higher percentage of Spanish speakers. Unfortunately, I do not know the percentage of speakers who speak Spanish in the United States, unfortunately, so I cannot give the exact demographic. But let's say you do. Would you disagree with the fact that perhaps knowing Spanish can or help you have more easier conversations with a said shopkeeper regarding a particular thing, and instead of moving your hands and gesturing with your body languages, perhaps you conversing it like a normal person to person in another language, it definitely helps, according to me. It helps. And you have to also look into the perspective that per, as you said, many resources available to students outside school. uh, Personally, I feel that if we look we're looking at it more from a more first world perspective. Yeah, let's look at it from the perspective of countries whose economy is not that well developed. Resources are not that readily available, and if a government does make it into a policy of the fact that okay, we need to promote two or more languages because we understand that we need to send because we live in a global world and we need to increase our reach. I can definitely see why. However, perhaps I can see your statement and your point of view that hey, Duolingo is present as long as you have the internet and you have a device ready to install the app. But you can easily learn a language, and I'm not disagreeing with the fact. However, if you look at the perspective of if you just give a random Google search right now and state, could I learn languages just by using Duolingo? The response that comes up usually is that no, you just can't with Duolingo. Duolingo helps you start it off, but to learn languages, you need additional resources. You need to initiate more time into it. And what schools do essentially by making it mandatory or compulsory in certain countries is the fact that okay, so you do learn another language. For me personally, when I was growing up in India, I couldn't see the perspective of why was I learning Hindi. I mean, English as a language, I could see it was spoken worldwide. But right now, Hindi as a language also anchors me to my roots as an Indian, to my back home, to my own subcontinent. To it roots me to my culture. In fact, language. Well, if you look into the how language is produced, language is just the pronunciations of certain words and how you pronounce it. And perhaps maybe why governments make it compulsory, I can't say for sure why they make it compulsory. I can just rely on the data that I know. They make it compulsory because it helps students to remember where they come from as individuals. And I right now I see how Hindi as a language is so important because yeah, it just anchors me as an individual in this ever changing world. And yeah, I think that's my personal perspective as well as my professional perspective on the basis of data. What do you think about it? What's your response to this?
Yeah, I would like to acknowledge that you brought up very good points there. And I would also like to say, personally, in fifth grade, when we had to learn Hindi as a third language, I was not exactly thrilled. I I just found that it was not the best use for me because I didn't really find the need to learn another language. And I was just happy doing my first and second languages. I'm not saying that it was bad. I'm just saying that I would have preferred it if it was an option for me to take a third language rather than being forced to take the third language. And this again ties back to my previous point of where schools are mandating children to take a third language even though they do not really want to. And yeah, otherwise, you did bring up great points, and I don't really have anything to say. But I still hold my belief that we don't really I don't really see a need for the education makers to mandate three languages or more than two languages. Mandating two languages should be enough. But after listening to your thoughts, I think probably giving an option of a third language at school might be good. So, say you could be given an option to learn a third language at school, or you could just take two languages, but you'd be required to take only two languages, and the third one is completely up to you. And I think that would take the positives of both of our arguments and make sure that we get the best of both of our sides. And finally, with respect to online learning resources, if there are some countries where they're not readily available, then the chances that there are options to learn other languages being there are also pretty slim. So, say in a country you're unable to get Duolingo or some sort of online resources, the chances that you have qualified teachers to teach you foreign languages are also pretty slim. Now, this is a completely hypothetical scenario. We're not talking about any country in particular, but hypothetically, if you say if you're unable to gain access to a globalized world and get the resources that are available online on the internet, the chances that you get access to in-person teachers is even less likely. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I can definitely look at it from that perspective as well. I mean, if we look at, as you said, like, if we look at certain hypothetical countries, which has a which does not have the said access to the resources, the chances are quite slim. However, I am the hopeful optimist who believes that hey, maybe there is that slim chance. Maybe it might be present. But yeah, in from a realist perspective and all jokes aside, I can definitely see your point. And perhaps maybe making it instead of non-compulsory but making it an option. I'm just curious to know perhaps that if we do a user-based research, how many students would actually be ready to take up an additional language if it is not made as a compulsion, because according to me and my personal opinion, from my experience, they'll be like, nah, we don't need another language because we are like already overburdened with stuff and so on and so forth, which again also depends of changes from individual to individual. So yeah, you do bring up some interesting points, and perhaps we could provide the availability and resources, but perhaps not make it compulsory. I definitely can see your point in that.
Yeah, true. So, do you also want to like discuss some online opportunities and other ways that students can use if they want to learn a new language?
I mean, sure. Do you have any in mind, and maybe I can add on to that?
So yeah, I came here about 2 years ago and I tried learning Italian on Duolingo, and that went fine. I got a good introduction to the language, but I didn't keep up with it. So yeah, I think it requires a lot of discipline if you want to learn a new language by yourself. And if you're really passionate about a language, I think you will have that discipline. But what about you? You seem like a person who's actually interested in learning multiple languages and different cultures, so you might have more points to add.
Yeah, I do have a very keen interest on learning more languages and understanding the culture from a perspective of its language. So when I started looking and learning Spanish, I looked at learning language learning apps. and they're variously available, especially on the App Store, such as Duolingo, Babbel, Rosetta Stone, and they allow users to learn a language at their own pace. And it also uses gamification and other interactive methods to make the languages learning fun and engaging. So instead of like, okay, let's do one more worksheet, it's like, yay, so we're going to do it like this. So especially in a generation which has grown up on the perspective of gaming, I feel that it also helps individuals, learn the language. There are also language exchange programs such as italki, tandem, and hellotalk, which allows language learners to connect with native speakers of the language they're learning. And these programs provide an opportunity to practice speaking and listening skills with native speakers and receive feedback on their language skills. And then again, we have YouTube, which is obviously one of the biggest resources that you can find. There are many YouTube channels dedicated to language learning. They provide free lessons and tips for language learners. And some of the popular channels, in my opinion, include Easy Languages, Learn French with Alexa, and Spanish with Paul. And I think finally is social media groups. If you right now go on to social media and search around on certain languages, perhaps on Twitter, perhaps on Facebook, you'll find certain groups that are readily available, and you provide resources over there. And language learners essentially could join those groups and forums dedicated to language learning, where they can connect with other learners and native speakers of the language. And the group provides an opportunity to practice language skills and ask questions to other learners and native speakers. So, for example, when I shifted to the Netherlands, I was looking at groups, and I found one of the groups where I could learn Dutch. So I did quite get a good understanding of what the Dutch culture is, and perhaps caught up on a few phrases or statements that I could use in day to day life as I spent it in the Netherlands. So yeah, that those are some of the resources that I feel are present.
Yeah, that's a pretty comprehensive guide, I must say.
Well, yeah. So thanks a lot, and this has been an awesome discussion, mate. And it was really refreshing to hear your views on learning new languages. We would also like to let our listeners know that in the end, it depends on you and your personal opinion on how many languages you need to know or learn. We are just providing you with the different arguments, and perhaps those arguments can essentially help you make a decision on the languages that you could present. So, well, with that, we conclude our 13th episode here on the student's opinion. And this episode is exclusively available on Spotify for the first 2 days, out of which it will be available on YouTube, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified when future episodes drop, and comment on what you thought of this episode. If you have any suggestions, be sure to email us at our email ID. We have presented it all across in most of our episodes before, but it's contact.thestudentsopinion@gmail.com. For now, it is Vineet and I signing off.